Welcome, everyone. Before we get started, I'll take care of a little housekeeping. As you're watching this webinar, if there's something you'd like to go back and see again, or you'd like to share this webinar with someone who couldn't attend, the slides and the recording will be posted on our website. I should also let you know that all attendees have been automatically muted, and we'll keep it this way for the entire webinar. But of course, if you have any questions, you can use the question pane. You can locate this at the top right by clicking on the speech bubble with the question mark. You can see it in the screenshot underlined in green. The question pane is distinct from the chat pane, which has the two layered speech bubbles. We will not be using the chat pane during this call, so be sure to use the question pane only. We'll be answering some questions through text throughout the webinar, and near the end of the webinar, we'll be holding a live Q&A session. We will choose some questions to answer live, so keep them coming throughout the call, so we know what is most relevant to you. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, I should mention that the DLC is a nonprofit organization with a mission to reduce energy, carbon, and light pollution. We do this by delivering the right information to decision makers, and one of the main ways we do that is by creating technical requirements that underpin our qualified products lists, which support the majority of incentive programs across North America. Here are our presenters for today's webinar. We're going to be passing the mic around as we go through. But first, I'll now give a quick overview of what the DLC is doing to support sustainability and resilience in our upcoming technical requirements SSL version 6.0. To help support the DLC's mission of carbon reduction and other sustainability efforts in the lighting industry, version 6 introduces optional reporting for certification centered around sustainability. Because other sections of our technical requirements are focused primarily on the use phase of lighting products, our goal with this is to bring other stages of the product's lifecycle into the picture. This could include considerations for embodied carbon, material health, recyclability, and more. Solar-powered luminaires support decarbonization and energy resilience. By introducing a product category for solar-powered luminaires in version 6, the DLC aims to support the adoption of this technology and collect and display the critical performance information needed to support system validation. Now I will hand it to Alexandra for integrating sustainability into your workflow.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. So I'm Alexandra Cristiano. I'm an architect and sustainability leader at HMFH Architects in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I think sustainability can be complex, and before jumping into these conversations, whether that's internally or externally with the clients, I think it can be really helpful to focus your thoughts on why you're doing this. We know that people spend the vast majority of their time indoors, and as designers, our work can have a significant impact on both human and environmental health. And we really want to take that responsibility seriously when we're designing spaces or when we're designing products. Next slide. So I think thinking about the experience of our end users can really ground the sustainability conversation and is very important. I also want people to expand their thinking and consider the impacts beyond the occupants and the end users to everyone along the supply chain, from the point of extraction to the end of life. While there are many installed products that may not have a negative impact on end users, I think lighting products can be a good example of that. There can be serious impacts to people and an environment along the other points of the supply chain. So when we're thinking about sustainability, we want to make sure we're considering that in our design decisions. Next slide. So now that we've grounded this conversation and we understand why we're having it and why it's important to us, we can jump into some of that complexity. There are so many aspects to consider when we're thinking about sustainability, and particularly sustainability in lighting. And this diagram here shows some of the aspects that we're considering in our work. Wherever possible, we want to think about how these elements overlap and how we can consider synergies to optimize our impact. Depending on your project type, you might have a slightly list here, but you can see that it's a pretty extensive list and a lot of these elements are intertwined. For example, when we're selecting products that have perhaps lower embodied carbon, we might also want to be thinking about registering materials and perhaps how the color of that material might impact light reflectance in a space. So a lot of overlapping considerations. And once we've done that, we want to break these out into project goals to focus us through the design period. Next slide. So at our firm, when we're thinking about sustainability goals, we like to evaluate this through 4 lenses: social, economic, environment, and educational. And we really find as we're setting goals and we're considering strategies, if we're checking these 4 boxes, those are goals and strategies that have a really strong chance of remaining in the project through design, construction, and occupancy. If we find something that has great environmental standards and great social criteria, but it doesn't meet the economics of the project, those things are likely to get VE'd and not stay in the project. So we want to make sure we're checking these 4 boxes when we're starting these conversations and finalizing our goals. Next slide. When we're thinking about sustainability goals, we also want to make sure that we're aligning with broader industry framework. Here you can see the AIA Materials Pledge, which we're a signatory to, and I think provides a really valuable framework for considering sustainability holistically. So we want to make sure that we're considering human health, social health and equity, ecosystem health, climate health, and the circular economy in all the decisions that we're making. So we're sort of layering these frameworks together and coming up with really specific project goals. Next slide. I think as we're setting these goals, one of the things that we want to be mindful of is our power as specifiers. You can see in this diagram, the professional decisions we're making far outweigh any of the sustainability or purchasing decisions we make in our personal life. So we have a lot of power professionally to move this conversation forward, and I think we want everyone to take that really seriously. So next slide. So once we've set these goals, we want to make sure we have an efficient strategy for implementation, because the ultimate goal would be that every project is achieving goals in a consistent manner and as efficiently as possible. And so what we've done is create internalized, standardized workflows, and that's sort of a path I would encourage people to take depending on your office and project structure. Here you can see an example of a daylight workflow, but what we want to do is break out tasks and decision points by project phase and make sure that we're checking those off right from the beginning. And by doing this, we think we can sort of equally elevate the sustainability standards on all of our projects. Next slide. And here you can just see we've done this for different aspects of sustainability. This is our phase-by-phase workflow, carbon conscious design. So looking at embodied and operational carbon and how we'd be testing those metrics and seeking to evaluate and improve our design at every phase. Next slide. So once we've established these workflows, the biggest direction we're giving to teams when considering sustainability and lighting is to focus on our most commonly specified products. I think all of us put a lot of thought and energy into those featured or sort of specialty products, but I think the reality is that most people probably have workhorse products that they're specifying in large quantities. We did an analysis of a research project and found that 70% of our square footage was covered by one version of a pendant and recessed product, sort of the same product, which is a significant amount of space. If we're able to optimize the products that we're using for those decisions and really seek to improve the sustainability, we can make a huge impact on every project. Next slide. So we sort of talked about the workflow and the process, and what I want to emphasize here is that we need to start having these conversations and implementing this workflow in pre-design. So the earlier we have these conversations, the bigger the impact we can have. We also want to make sure that we consider how we will be carrying this through construction and into occupancy. Once the building is out of our control, how can we set the end users up for success and make sure that all these strategies that we've worked so hard on are effectively implemented. Next slide. We also want to make sure that we're closing the loop between projects and that the bar is being raised every time we bring in new work. So this process of sharing lessons learned, coming up with a standard library of products, and looking how we can pass this research and optimization on to the next team is really important. Next slide. For everyone who's on this call today, I appreciate that you're here and you have an interest in this topic. I think, it's also fair to highlight we're at a point in lighting where I think we still need continued advocacy for sustainability, not only on our own projects, but broadly across the industry. And I think for a long time, the conversation in lighting has really focused on efficiency and electricity use. And I think at this moment, it's a good time for people to be committed for expanding that conversation and talking about all of the other aspects of holistic sustainability. Next slide. And as we're thinking about the future of sustainability, I think we also need to be aware that it's a continuing, evolving field. There's always new research, standards, and certifications are being adjusted, and we all need to do our best to keep abreast of those changes. I think one of the big things that we're all going to be absorbing over the next few months and should be aware of is LEED v5, and how daylighting and artificial lighting has changed in that standard. So I think the important takeaway here is that sustainability is continuing to evolve and advance, and as practitioners, we need to make sure that we're continuing to stay current with these standards and do everything we can do to push our own work forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. I'll now hand it over to Scott Roos for luminaire sustainability metrics.
Thank you, Adrian. And what a great segue, Alexandra, into the next segment here on luminaire sustainability metrics. These metrics are evolving, and as a way of background, I've been involved with sustainability over the last several years during my tenure with Acuity Brands, where I spent about 25% of my time supporting sustainability initiatives, both within the company as well as some of the industry initiatives that are going on. There's a number of ways that we're assessing sustainability, both at the whole building level, like the LEED program that Alexandra just mentioned. But today I'm going to be focusing primarily on the ways we can assess sustainability achievements at the product level for luminaires. Next slide. So some of the key ways that we're doing this, of course, at the whole building level, we've got LEED, WELL, Living Building Challenge, as well as other programs. But at the product level, we have several different metrics that are available at different stages. But each one addresses a different element of sustainability, from human health, climate health, ecosystem health, to social health and equity, and the circular economy. So we're going to take a look at each groupings of these metrics and look at what's good about them, what's very helpful, and what are some of the limitations. And again, the intent is to find things that really help us advance sustainability versus getting into a check the box mentality to say, oh, I'm just going to use that and not have it necessarily making driving improvement. So next slide, please. So the first group that we're going to look at are metrics that are associated with human health. And this is mostly with, it deals primarily with the material health and what are the material health impacts involved in the materials that are used to produce the luminaires. Next slide, please. So I'm guessing most of the audience, or many of you in the audience, are familiar with declare labels. There's actually another metric that you may not be as familiar with, health product declarations. And both of these are very well-established, standardized methods for manufacturers to disclose the chemical ingredients of the components that are used in luminaires, as well as other building product categories. From a benefit side, both of these disclose detailed chemical ingredients of all components within a luminaire, and there's optional third-party verification available for both. And they both flag toxic ingredients that have known human health impacts. Next, please. But it is important to understand some of the limitations of these. First of all, while these are very good and comprehensive for certain categories of building products like, let's say, carpet, wall coverings, and such, they're not that comprehensive for electronic products like luminaires, because they generally exclude the impact of the chemical ingredients used in electronics. There's exemptions that allow exclusions. Another limitation is that we know from our work that supply chains are not yet able to capture all of the additives that are used in plastics and paints. So for example, I can tell you with pretty good certainty that any powder coat finish that has a gloss and resistance for UV and gloss retention probably has a PFAS chemical in there, but they don't yet show up in these disclosures. And I can also tell you from work with declare labels specifically that there's a lot of inconsistency in terms of accuracy and completeness, even with third-party verification. And they're even susceptible to greenwashing. Two of my favorites are, for example, you'll see declare labels for a component in a luminaire, like a luminaire extrusion or a felt panel. It's not terribly meaningful. And the second green element of greenwashing is red list free. If you have red list free for a luminaire that has electronics in it, it's not terribly meaningful. The most common example would be, or most common two examples would be a remote driver luminaire that excludes the impact of the driver, or an incandescent socketed luminaire that doesn't take into account the impact of the LED lamp that's going to be placed in the luminaire. Next slide, please. And the other element that we find with helping identify hazardous ingredients is RoHS, restriction on hazardous substances. Next slide, or next advance, please. So the benefit of RoHS is that a RoHS compliant component or fixture restricts the use of 10 of the most common hazardous substances that are used in the manufacturing of electronic components. And most of the drivers and many of the electronic components that are sold into North America are supplied by global suppliers that already meet these requirements because they're selling their components into the EU. Next, please. Some of the limitations with RoHS is that North American luminaire manufacturers are not consistent in how and if they identify RoHS compliant components on their spec sheets and other technical documentation. And unlike in the EU, where the complete luminaires have been tested for RoHS compliance, in North America, it's primarily focused on drivers and light engines and other electronic components. It's very rare that a North American luminaire manufacturer would submit their whole luminaire for RoHS compliance. Next, please. Okay, moving on to environmental product declarations. This is, here we're talking about a report that summarizes the results of a full luminaire life cycle assessment. Next slide, please. So again, the environmental product declaration is a public facing summary report of the results of a life cycle assessment. Next, please. The benefits of an environmental product declaration is they're very comprehensive. They cover all of the environmental impact to the air, water, and soil in 7 different categories, as you see in the bottom right of the chart. The process for life cycle assessments is very sound. It's regulated by ISO standards. Luminaire EPDs the results can be used to contribute to the life cycle assessment of a whole building. Both product specific and industry-wide EPDs, and I'll talk a little bit about industry-wide EPDs a little bit later on, are accepted for credits in LEED. And doing a life cycle assessment can be extremely instructive for a manufacturer to find the hotspots to drive continuous improvement. Next, please. There are some limitations to environmental product declarations that we need to be aware of. First of all, they're very difficult to do, time-consuming, and costly for complex electronic products like luminaires. There are ongoing efforts in the industry to try and simplify and lower the cost of producing life cycle assessments and EPTs so they can be scaled to an entire manufacturer's portfolio. But early indications are that these may reduce the accuracy of the process. Life cycle assessments or environmental product declarations, if you've ever looked through one, they're very difficult to read and interpret. Another big one is you cannot compare the results of a life cycle assessment as published in an EPD from different products, from different manufacturers. There's too many differences in data sources, the assumptions that are going into the life cycle assessment, the software that's being used to collect the data, the chosen stages that are included in the life cycle assessment, and other ongoing standardization activities that are going on specifically for luminaires. So you cannot compare the results for even of like luminaires from different manufacturers. You cannot compare the results and say, oh, one is better or worse than the other. And the other thing that it makes the cost benefit a little bit questionable for luminaires is we know from the early life cycle assessments that have been done on luminaires that approximately 90% of the environmental impact over their lifetime comes from the operating energy. And operating energy is already something that is more accurately being quantified by the lighting specifier on a project-specific basis, take into account all the luminaires that are being applied, the control scenario that's being put in place, the local energy grid, the use patterns of the building, etc. So we're already doing a pretty good job quantifying the operating energy impacts outside of a life cycle assessment in a much more project-specific manner. Next slide. Another metric that's focused in on embodied carbon is TM65. Next slide. So TM65 is a calculation methodology that was created by the Chartered Institution of Building Service Engineers out of the UK. And it's a basic formula to estimate the embodied carbon created from the manufacturer and use all the way through the end of life of a luminaire. Next, please. So the benefits of TM65 is, number one, it's a very simple, quick calculation, and it can be done at no cost to the manufacturer other than, of course, the time to do the calculation. The methodology uses standardized CO2 per pound material emissions factor, which drives much greater consistency when you're comparing between two different luminaires. The single number that is the result of the calculation, it's very easily understood and it's readily comparable. And you can take your TM65 calculation and have it verified by a third party to ensure accuracy and consistency. Next, please. Some of the limitations of TM65 is, unlike a life cycle assessment, which covers the impact of all emissions on air, water, and soil, a TM65 only focuses on CO2 emissions from embodied carbon in the product. It doesn't address operating energy at all. Theoretically, the TM65 is less accurate than the results that come from embodied carbon from doing a life cycle assessment and publishing an EPD. We know from some of the work that's been done that the current TM65 model overstates CO2 by approximately 30% versus environmental product declarations. And this may be an opportunity for refining the model going forward. If you look in the formula there at the far right, there's a 30% buffer factor in there. So it appears that the basic calculation without that buffer factor is maybe more accurate for luminaires than was originally intended. And another limitation is the results of a TM65 are currently not recognized by any of the sustainable building certifications such as LEED, so it does not help with driving compliance. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, the next item is a circular economy assessment. Just as way of background, the lighting industry is primarily a linear economy now. Next, please. We are aspiring to become a more circular economy, but we have a long way to go. And so I think it's important when we're looking at sustainability metrics to also look at how a luminaire is designed and supported to help enable a more complete circular economy. Next, please. So one of the tools that's available is TM66. This is another tool that was developed by the Chartered Institute of Building Service Engineers out of the UK, specifically developed for luminaires. It's an Excel-based questionnaire that helps a manufacturer or a specifier assess, how well a luminaire has been designed and manufactured and supported to enable a circular economy. Next, please. So a number of benefits. Number one, it assesses the circularity of a luminaire based on 78 attributes spanning from product design to manufacturing, materials, as well as the ecosystems in place for product reuse. The answers to the survey need to be supported with evidence, and there is third-party verification available. The questions address all of the high impact areas for embodied carbon reduction. It's very inexpensive. There's an Excel spreadsheet that you can download for less than $100, and you can use it as often as you like without additional cost. Going through the questionnaire is highly instructive. I have experience working with design teams that have been developing trying to develop sustainably designed luminaires. And I can tell you, going through these questions with the designers was extremely instructive for them to understand the impact that their design decisions and sourcing decisions had on sustainability. And the results of all these questions, if they're published, provides great insights and a basis for discussion between specifiers and manufacturers to really get into the details of how a luminaire is designed and how it's supporting or not supporting the circular economy. Next, please. There are a few limitations to TM66. The survey answers and evidence are subject to some interpretation and definitely a learning curve. And again, like TM65, it's not currently being recognized by any of the sustainable building certifications. Next, please. And finally, I wanted to close on making you aware of two upcoming resources on sustainability that I think are going to be very, very useful for the industry at large. Next, please. The first is a report that's going to be published, summarizing the results of a life cycle assessment incubator study that was done by the Green Light Alliance. And it's a comprehensive review of life cycle assessments that were done for downlights, cylinders, linear fixtures, troughers, and post tops, based on data from 28 different luminaire manufacturers, both in North America and globally. The results of the study are extremely informative, providing insight on the relative environmental impacts of the different luminaire types, identifying the highest areas of environmental impact, and providing guidance for manufacturers and specifiers on how to make the biggest reductions. For example, one of the insights that came out of here was, of course, the outsized impact of the operating energy and other impacts, like, for example, transportation. There's a lot of discussion about, it's a good thing to specify a fixture that's manufactured locally. And of course, it is a good thing to do that. It minimizes transportation impacts. But when you look at the results of the life cycle assessment, you can see that the transportation impacts per se over the life of a luminaire, they're very, very small. And then another great thing about this study, it's going to result in the publishing of the first industry-wide environmental product declarations, which will be available for participating manufacturers and so you'll be able to, anyone that supported this research, so for example, for a downlight, you'd be able to pick one of the manufacturers that was supporting the provided data into this, and it will allow you to apply a point towards LEED. Next, please. And finally, the Illuminating Engineering Society is going to be publishing a very substantial update to the Sustainable Lighting Practice document. It provides a comprehensive view of how applied lighting and luminaires impact sustainability. It provides recommendations to guide both lighting designers and manufacturers to drive improvements. It provides an objective review of the available metrics in more detail than I was able to cover today. It is informational and it's not really prescriptive, but it's going to be a significant resource guide. And you do not have to be an IES member to purchase this document. You can go on to the IES web store and you'll be able to buy this when it releases later this fall. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Scott. Next, we have Andrew Harper for resilient, efficient, and adaptable lighting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Drew Harper, and I'm an R&D engineer at the California Lighting Technology Center at UC Davis. And today I'd like to talk to you all about one of our ongoing research efforts in resilient exterior lighting, the REAL project, where REAL stands for Resilient, Efficient, Adaptable Exterior Lighting. This project is a lab evaluation and a large-scale field demonstration of a hybrid solar and grid-powered exterior luminaire. And the goal is to evaluate their ability to operate primarily off-grid, reduce energy consumption, maintain lighting service during grid disruptions. And over the course of this project, we deployed these systems across multiple California sites, monitored their performance, and gathered feedback to understand both technical and practical aspects of resilient lighting. Next slide. Next slide for that, thanks. So conventional exterior lighting has some persistent challenges that go beyond efficiency. Exterior lighting runs all night, every night. So that continuous grid draw drives operating costs and adds to carbon emissions, especially where the grid mix still relies heavily on fossil fuels. In many communities, the poles, the wiring, and the infrastructure are decades old. Failures of these increase safety risks, require frequent maintenance, and can be costly. Most exterior lighting systems have no backup capability at all, so when the grid goes down, whether from storms or planned safety shutoffs, they simply go dark, creating risks for the public and limiting community function during emergencies. Next slide. So the REAL project aims to address these problems through a multi-year effort to test resilient exterior lighting solutions at scale. And this project was funded by the California Energy Commission from mid-2021 through early 2026. And it combines product development with industry partners, lab evaluations here at CLTC, and as I mentioned a couple times, a large-scale field deployment. So currently, we've installed over 150 hybrid solar battery LED luminaires across 8 locations in California, with another 60 coming online in the coming weeks. And the key partners for this effort include TRC, the California Energy Alliance, the DLC, University of Utah, multiple community agencies, and several industry partners as well. Next slide. So what exactly is a REAL luminaire? Well, each luminaire uses a hybrid solar and grid power system. So the key component within each luminaire is a unified LED driver, solar charge controller, and battery charge controller, which prioritizes energy flow through the battery. So solar production always charges the battery first, and the grid is only used as a supplemental source when the battery state of charge drops below a set threshold. The batteries we're using here are high capacity lithium ion silicon dioxide or LiFePO batteries, which are sized to power the luminaires up to a full night. And in favorable conditions, the system can operate indefinitely without drawing power from the grid. These batteries are powering high efficiency LEDs through that unified charge controller LED driver device. And these LEDs are circadian friendly. So the spectrum and light distribution are designed to be biologically appropriate, supporting visibility and safety while minimizing negative impacts on people and the environment. Next slide. So here are 3 embodiments of the REAL luminaire. At the top here, we'll see what we refer to as the all-in-one, which is a solar panel, luminaire, LED luminaire, and battery all housed in a single unit. It has a 37.4 watt LED, 200 watts of solar, and 960 watt hour silicon dioxide battery. Below that is the bollard. It's about a 4-foot tall bollard with vertically mounted solar panels and an internal battery. It has 6 watts of LED luminaire, 12 watt solar panel, and 198 watt LiFePO battery. And on the right, we have our non-integrated fixture, which has the solar panel and the battery bank on top of the pole with the luminaire head below. And this has a couple versions, either a 37 or a 55 watt LED, a 200 or 325 watt solar, and a 960 watt hour or double silicon dioxide battery. Next slide. So to evaluate performance under real world conditions, we installed 150 with 60 more coming online across 8 locations, ranging from Northern California to Southern California, covering multiple climate zones. And this range is important because California's climate varies widely, and so does solar availability. For example, sunny, flat, central California locations like Fresno County offer ideal solar conditions most of the year, while coastal, hilly Southern California sites like our Chula Vista site see more cloud coverage and variable sun. Testing across this range ensures the technology is ready for deployment anywhere in the state. And the sites themselves also vary in application. So we have apartment complexes, main streets of cities, and public parks. So this diversity in geography, application, and configuration gives us a robust data set for evaluating resilience and energy savings and lighting quality across an array of California locations. Next slide. So to understand exactly how these systems are performing, we've installed these pole-mounted monitoring and verification systems on a subset of poles at each site. These units capture total AC power coming into the pole, as well as the DC current and voltage in and out of the battery. And so because all power flows through the battery, this gives us both the LED power consumption as well as the solar charging contribution in a single set of measurements. We also tracked internal luminaire temperature and solar panel temperature to understand thermal behavior in different climates. And this monitoring hardware was housed in an IP65 rated enclosure mounted directly to the poles with cell-enabled data loggers transmitting data wirelessly back to servers. In addition to the electrical and thermal data, we also collected pre and post retrofit lighting performance measurements. And that included nighttime illuminance readings to compare the new system with the baseline system. We also did luminance mapping photos before and after the installs, and we built out photometric models using software like AGI to visualize and verify the delivered light distribution. Next slide. So here on the left, you can see one of our Google Earth overlaid AGI models for one of our apartment complex sites. And so across these demonstration sites, these systems operated on battery power for over 95% of all nighttime hours during the data collection period we have to date, which ranges from March of this year through July of this year. So in practical terms, that means these lights were almost always running off solar energy, with the grid only stepping in occasionally. So that translates to roughly 95 to 100% reduction in grid energy during this period. Our post-retrofit lighting measurements and occupant surveys confirm the results of our photometric modeling. Again, shown here on the left, showing that we had sufficient nighttime light levels and uniform coverage. And both occupants and site managers had positive feedback on both light level distribution and visual comfort. Next slide. So here's a chart of one of our 200 poles that I wanted to exemplify here. So here you can see in the green, we have solar charging during the day, solar charging power during the day. And then in the red, we have LED discharge from the battery to the LEDs at night. I chose this one because I wanted to show that there are instances where certain poles will draw from the grid. So that little line, those little green bumps being called out, charging from the grid, are these instances. And this could be for a pole that has an obstruction to the panel, whether it be a building or a tree or another pole or something like that. But this is one of the examples of a pole that was what we considered to be performing worse than the others. On average, all 95% of nighttime hours were purely running off solar. But this is just to exemplify that the system will draw from the grid if necessary. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, our next steps are going to be to finish this installation that I've been referring to at our final demonstration site, which is an apartment complex in West Sacramento, where we're installing 60 more of these real luminaires, as well as monitoring and verification equipment. We'll continue collecting data from all other sites for the next 10 months, right through the end of project closeout, because right now our data set ranges from spring to summer of California, so the fall rainy period and potentially fire periods in California will give us some valuable data for how these systems perform across the full set of California climates. And our goal here right now is going to be to collect a substantial data set across all these sites and then do some data analysis to kind of quantify total energy savings, greenhouse gas reduction, and resilience benefit of this technology could deliver if deployed statewide. That analysis will help inform utilities, municipalities, and policymakers about the broader impact of the real system. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We are now on to the Q&A portion of this webinar. So if you have any questions for our panelists, send them in. I will start with a question for Drew. Why did you choose outdoor lighting as the central technology for the REAL project?
Yeah, I think there's two good reasons for that. First, there are over a million, between 1 and 3 million exterior light fixtures in California. So there's a huge market or a huge potential for savings in this category. And then beyond that, beyond the savings potential and the GHG reduction, these are devices that are extremely important for outages. If you have an outage due to either a public safety shutoff or a fire or a storm, exterior lights can illuminate roadways, paths of egress out of a town in case of a fire, etc. So both in terms of scale, there are many exterior light fixtures. It presents a large opportunity for energy savings, but also in terms of functionality, what these devices do for the community.
Thank you. Okay, my next question is for Scott. Besides energy consumption, what types of environmental or health impacts are the biggest areas of concern for lighting products?
So I would say, like, if you look at the results of the life cycle assessments that have been done, next to the operating energy, the next biggest impact comes from the extraction of the materials and the processing of those materials to build the luminaire. So, aluminum, steel, the electronic components, the plastics that get used in there, all the, extraction of the raw materials and processing those materials to produce parts for the luminaire. By and away, that's the next largest category of impact. And I think that's why when I went over the TM65 embodied carbon calculation methodology, for luminaires anyways, I think that's why that metric is probably more accurate than has been maybe recognized up till now, because of the outsized impact of those materials, and that estimation methodology captures that quite well. Beyond that, the impacts from the different elements of the design of the product and use of the product and disposal of the product are relatively small, but again, they all add up. What happens to the luminaire at end of life has impact. And I would say, sorry, one other area that I think is important is the way the product has been designed to support the circular economy. Because if you can keep that product in service longer and be able to replace light engines, drivers, etc. easily, that prevents us from having to make another luminaire during its installed life to have a whole nother luminaire being built to cause impact.
Thank you. And now I have a question for Alexandra. What would you recommend as a starting place for manufacturers who are new to sustainability?
I think similar to the advice I would give to designers, I'd really appreciate it, and I think it would be great for people to start with their highest value product. What is the thing, that we're seeing the most of? And if we can have excellent documentation for these common products, I think that's a great starting point. I think it was Scott who said, we don't want to just be doing this to check a box. So, right, documentation is really the first step, but ultimately, we're not collecting documents for the sake of doing it. We want to be able to be tracking optimization and improvement. But I think if we can see that improvement for these things where we're specifying, these massive volumes, that's such a great place to start. And I think also making the documentation that's currently available really prominent to designers, if that can feature prominently on cut sheets, along with an expiration date, I think that would be fantastic to really highlight, the products that have already done this work and have it available and really make that clear to specifiers.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question for Scott. Considering that retrofit kits keep existing housing extending its life, are they considered as better rated lighting solutions as compared to luminaires?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again, Adrian?
Yes.
Beginning.
Considering that retrofit kits keep existing housing extending its life, so you're reusing the housing for retrofits, are those considered better rating solutions than compared to luminaires?
Sorry, Adrian, my internet went out for a second. I'm not sure.
That's okay. I was worried it was mine. All
So
right.
the question was on retrofit kits and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So that's one of the ways, when you're specifying a product, if you can specify something that has less material content, or in the case of retrofit kits, that may preserve some of the material content of a fixture that's already installed and keeping it from going into the waste stream, absolutely. I would say while you need a full life cycle assessment to truly understand all the impacts, I would say in general, smaller, lighter weight fixtures with less material content results in less environmental impact.
Thank you. For Alexandra, do you expect a change in the emphasis on embodied carbon declarations with lighting, since we will have an industry averaged approach, and since LEED v5 is only focused on building structure elements and materials and not on MEP products or materials?
So I think the emphasis on embodied carbon in the built environment is continuing to grow and gain momentum. So I think we're going to see an increased focus on that. I think the industry average EPDs and the group that is working on that has done really phenomenal work. I'd be interested. I know, Scott, you were involved in that as well. I think on the design side, once we have these industry average EPDs, the hope on my end would be that we start to get product specific average EPDs, and we're going to be able to make a comparison between those two. So we'll know if we're selecting optimized products and how that compares to an average. I think we're still a little ways out from that, but my hope is that that is the direction that we're moving in, and we're going to be able to track that optimization. And I think the question about LEED v5, I would hope that there'll be room to include other products. I don't have any inside information on that, but I think in past versions, there's been some room to include other product categories under innovation or pilot. So I'm hoping that, as we move forward, lighting will get included more and more in the embodied carbon conversation.
Yeah. All right. For Drew, is your study considering the useful battery cycle life before it needs to be replaced?
Definitely. Yeah, that's a huge consideration. Our study is not doing like a direct battery cycle analysis where we're like quantifying how the battery performs over time, but we are using the manufacturer. Like there's tons of data on that for any type of battery you're going to use. We're absolutely considering that into our ROI analysis and savings analysis, because not only is that going to be it's a critical factor for these types of systems. If the batteries are dying at a faster rate than the other components, and it's requiring maintenance or replacement, that's a significant overhead cost. So yes, it's a core thing that we're evaluating in this.
Awesome. All right, we have a question asking for Scott, yes, okay, to elaborate on how social justice and social equity plays a role in sustainable lighting.
I think I'm going to defer that to Alexandra. I know that's
Okay,
a
yes.
topic you've been particularly passionate about.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important conversation. I think, people define that a little bit differently when we're thinking about the AI materials pledge, which we talk about a lot at our firm. It's really talking about preferring products from manufacturers that have looked at human rights in their operations and supply chains and sort of the impact they're having on the workers and communities when they operate. I think there's some really good organizations that are doing work in that area. Design for Freedom is one that often comes up if you want to sort of dig into that topic a little bit more. So I think, one aspect is how is the manufacturer handling that? And there's certainly also, for example, the Just label, which gives you some information about how a company is operating. And I think, when we're thinking about it, we also want to be thinking about how we're providing high quality lighting to sort of all people in all places.
Oh, Alexander, that reminds me, I think I may have missed the last slide in my presentation where I talked about corporate sustainability reports. That's another piece of information that, especially the larger public companies or luminaire manufacturers, will publish a corporate sustainability report that gives some insights into things beyond the product level that the company is doing to, including, supporting social justice.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Scott. I should have. Social responsibility reports are a great one.
Thank you. So we actually have a question for the DLC, which I would like to address real quick. Does the DLC have any specific documentation or requirements for solar lighting, or are you planning to? And the answer is yes. In our version 6 of the solid state lighting technical requirements, we are adding a category for solar lighting. These technical requirements are currently in the drafting phase, but will be coming out at the end of this year. And we are planning to certify the lighting portion of solar lighting as well as collect additional data on the other components. So look out for that. All right, let's see. So for Drew, regarding the study, in the life cycle assessment of solar lights installed for outdoor use, independent grid fluctuations, was any decline in performance observed over extended operating periods under varying external conditions? The chart only showed grid fluctuations.
So firstly, I guess I would qualify by saying that our data set is only right now from July through March of July of this year. So it's a pretty limited data set. Not sure I understand the question in its entirety though. What that graph was showing wasn't grid power. It was minimally grid power. It was energy flow into and out of the battery was what that was showing. And those peaks where it showed charging from grid were just instances where we identified that the battery was drawing power from the. Could you repeat that question again? I think I'm missing a key part of it.
Sure, let me find it. All right. In the life cycle assessment of solar lights installed for outdoor use, I'm sorry. Let me start over. In the life cycle assessment of solar lights installed for outdoor use, independent of grid fluctuations, was any decline in performance observed over extended operating periods under varying external conditions? The chart only showed grid fluctuations.
Okay, I guess without
It's all right.
without fully understanding the question still, I would say there hasn't been any decline in performance over the period, but again, our period is only 3 months so far. So I wouldn't
We can
expect to
follow
see a appreciable decline in component performance over this time anyway. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. I'm not.
That's all right. Yes, we can always follow up. So I have another question for you. Are your outdoor luminaires dark sky friendly?
So I'm not 100% sure what the actual qualifications to be dark sky friendly are, but I do know that these luminaires have a bug rating and they're designed to minimize upward glare. So they have that consideration like in their specification sheets. So as far as that is concerned, there's consideration towards it, but I don't know that they would qualify as dark sky friendly if that's a more stringent criterion, which I believe it probably is.
All right.
That being said, I also would say that while that is certainly a consideration, I mentioned circadian friendly and reduced glare and occupant comfort. the core focus of this effort was not necessarily glare mitigation or circadian friendliness. It was more resiliency.
All right. Okay, I'll go over to Scott. What trends are you seeing in the demand for more sustainable lighting?
I would say it was mixed. I would say there's a small percentage of lighting specifiers that are very concerned about sustainability. And when I say small, is it 10%, 15%, 20% of this? I don't know what the percentage, but it's a relatively small percent of specifiers are really focused in on sustainability and trying to drive this. And I would say it's a pretty vocal group. But I would say we're still in the very early stages of having sustainability from a luminaire specification standpoint being common for the typical lighting specifier.
Okay.
I don't know, Alexandra, maybe you have the same, you have a different take on that.
I think, anecdotally, it seems to me like there's a little bit of a regional component to that. I think there's some jurisdictions where there's starting to be pretty significant
That's true.
regulations around sustainability and building performance, and that's really pushing it, but that can vary a little bit depending on what part of the country you're working in.
I'm going to extend that question to Drew as well about what trends are you seeing in terms of the need for resilience?
Well, I can speak to my specific use case here, but I am seeing other products in this category emerging, as well as within the manufacturers that we partner with for this project. I've already seen iterations on these designs and next generations on these solar battery integrated luminaire designs in the period of this grant. So the system we're using is like a Gen 1, and they're already on Gen 3. So I'm seeing progression in this product space, at least.
Awesome. Okay. Let's do one more for Scott. So what are some good indicators that a product is easily serviceable?
I'm sorry, that is
Serviceable.
The question.
What are some good indicators that a product is serviceable?
So I think the TM66 report is good because it helps quantify. It's easy, for example, for a manufacturer to say, oh yeah, you can replace the light engine. And yet when you dig into it, you see, oh wait, they've got thermal grease or some other, the electrical connectors aren't easy to. So I think that's why I like that TM66 process, because it asks the question, is the light engine replaceable, for example, but then you need evidence to say this is why I gave that rating. So like I say, TM66 is not perfect, but I think it's a really good start, and starting to back up statements about how well a product can be serviced and such.
Great. I think that concludes the Q&A portion of this webinar. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye.